Great. I also start my record.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so maybe we can jump right into it because it's a really long interview.
I noticed.
Yeah. So feel free to elaborate on anything as long as you wish. But maybe if you keep short on certain answers, then it will be shorter. And I don't know if you identify as a user yourself or an ally, because some of the questions are for
Yeah, I
users,
saw
but
that. Yeah, I'm fine with the questions. I was home with little children, and I used as much cocaine as I could find. But you know what I mean. It was just not the kind of drug use that the drug users in a. But what I consider a drug user is someone who's at risk of, this is how we always had to do our funding, at risk of HIV and hepatitis C. And so we always say, we used to say hard drug use, but then everyone gets mad.
Yeah.
You can't say addict,
Yeah.
whatever. I don't care what we say, but I know our groups always try to involve the most marginalized drug users. And then we figure that the less marginalized drug users will benefit as well. So that's how we run things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I just ask the questions, and then maybe I will turn my video off to have maybe a better connection, and then maybe I will get a more stable connection, and I also mute myself and then mute myself back again. So if you don't mind, I turn my video off. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question is, could you please introduce yourself and the organization or network you're currently with now?
My name's Ann Livingston, and I work for the BC Yukon Association of Drug War Survivors, and it's a provincial drug user group that serves the entire province. And we started in 2009, and we were just recently funded, so we existed for a long time, making sure we held our annual general meeting, but we were just basically doing forming the group and demanding funding, and we finally got it. So
congratulations to that. And if you're otherwise open about this as an activist, can you share with us details on your personal drug use career, if you would like?
So I've always made a real disconnect between me and drug users, in the sense that I've used drugs, acid, pot, recreationally, and cocaine and that kind of thing, but I had never injected drugs. And my work was more that I'm a community organizer and a community person. So I got involved in the drug users' rights movement because I lived in the downtown east side. So I have 4 children, and I moved to the downtown east side, and right in the middle of a overdose crisis. It was extremely high, the number of overdoses in Vancouver in the 90s. And I could see, I was next to the fire hall, so it was siren after siren after siren, and I saw the people on the street, and they were just abandoned. They weren't allowed in anywhere. And I had always grown up in a family where, my mom was an activist, and so I thought, well, I know what to do. The other reason I felt like I knew what to do is my oldest son has cerebral palsy, and he's disabled. So there was a lot of work being done where people with disabilities were demanding to have rights and demanding that they have a say over how money is spent on them, and that they design their own programs, and that they're, so this was a big movement. And when I met with the drug users, I realized they had no autonomy at all. And when I saw the trouble, I thought, I'd phoned everyone I could think to phone, all the people in the government, and the welfare policy was causing people to be homeless. The places people were living in were extremely substandard, and they weren't allowed to have guests, and it was so easy for me to see what was wrong. So I did a bunch of that, but the real breakthrough for me was I met someone at a coroner's meeting. Larry Campbell was the coroner for Vancouver. He's now a senator, but anyway, and he became mayor eventually. But he was very forthright and said, drug users shouldn't be dying at this rate, and if it was any other group of people. And so I thought, oh, okay. And I met some women. A woman, Melissa Eyre, spoke up in the meeting and said, I've been using drugs for 20 years. So I thought, I'll get her number. But I was actually packing a kid around on my shoulder at the meeting. So I just did it with the children and did it as a volunteer. And I worked with her, and Dana Larson was doing a magazine with her called The Hype. And anyway, so there was some activism already going on, and I just said, well, let's just start getting meetings together. So we went around the neighborhood and found out who'd let us meet. The Needle Exchange actually let us meet, and they gave us $100 a month, and we just started organizing. So that's the part I brought to it. I wasn't an expert on drug use, and the technique of organizing was really important to stay out of the way and make sure that the people who do know about drug use are the ones that design what we're going to do next. So we basically started with no funding and then got these tiny grants and almost immediately opened an illegal injection site. It was quite remarkable when I think back on it now, but we were able to find a really cheap storefront, and I put it in my name, and I wear a flowered dress, and the lease, they give me the lease, and then I put the phone in my name. It was interesting. The reason I was able to live kind of in poverty and not feel worried about myself and my children was because I was in a housing co-op, and my rent was always prorated to my income. So I had really quite a nice 3-bedroom apartment, and the first meetings were actually held in my living room. And so we were able to, I wasn't always plagued by this idea that I needed an income. So I was quite free to just be an activist and go to everywhere and be at all the meetings and bring all the drug users and hold, we had 2 meetings a week for years and years and years. And that's what seemed to work, was being really true to a method of organizing where you take notes and you make sure you're identifying the issues from the people in the room, not your own bias, and then start acting on them and take notes and keep checking back with the group. And you do that over a long period of time, and you develop leadership, and you get a sort of a reputation in the neighborhood that you're going to be there when you say you're going to be there. And we had guest speakers come from the police and from social planning, and our MLA would come, and our MP. So they were quite charmed and really quite shocked that hundreds of drug users would come to these meetings and listen carefully to what the person said and ask intelligent questions. Anyway, that's how we got going.
Thank you very much. If Jeremy is still there, I just had the idea that maybe we should plug in the phone so it doesn't deplete, or is it plugged in?
I've got 80-something% on it.
Oh, so you can see it. Oh, yeah. Great. Okay, good. Great. So the next question is, what has been the history of the drug users' rights movement in your country, and specifically in Vancouver? It's a long question.
Yeah, it was like Melissa was already active, and they had this, the Gentleman Junkie Journal, and she had been doing with, who's so famous, the guy who did the rat thing had been working with people on methadone, and they had meetings, and also Susan Boyd, his name's Bruce Alexander, and he's a professor. And when I came to the neighborhood, he was just winding down some activism. So I met, Melissa knew him, and she had gone to these meetings. There was a big fight in the 70s here. We had one of the really early methadone programs in the world in Vancouver. And then they put people in jail. And the drug users would tell me this. They put their arm through the bars on the prison cell they were in, and they would be injected with methadone, which I didn't, injectable methadone is pretty rare. Anyway, that whole program, they took a civil rights approach, and they said you can't hold people in jail for being addicted or whatever it was. But so that work had been done. I don't think they had to go to court. They took it down, kind of. They stopped doing that program. But a number of people on methadone then knew each other and knew of what was going on. And Susan Boyd, who's a professor at University of Victoria now, and I believe she's experiential, but she had what she called DAMS, Meeting Support for Women. So there was a group of women with children who had fought to keep custody of their children even though they were on methadone. And that used to be grounds for being kicked off, losing your children. The child protection stuff is still very bad, but that was a big breakthrough. So those were some of the activists that we came and met and were connected to. And then we did the more mass organizing, where you just invite every drug user in the neighborhood and hold meetings. The small meetings are 30, the big meetings are 100, and you just keep going and going week after week, and the note taking, and then guests. So we had a sort of a methodology to what we were doing, but we did have some activism before I started.
And in Vancouver, and maybe about Vandu and the user
Yeah,
organization.
so the first project we did wasn't Vandu. It was what do we call ourselves? The Back Alley Project, or we were the Innovative Empowerment Society, and we also had. I was working with really radical people. They had another neighborhood, and they had a cafe that they ran as a cooperative, and we were organizing people on welfare. And one of the groups we organized was people who used drugs. And then those other groups tended to shut down, and I just kept going with the drug user group. We called it the Downtown East Side Drug User Discussion Group or something. So, and two activists, I'm trying to think, Ken Quayle and Brian McKenzie, they weren't very long in town, but they had gotten a $5,000 grant to write a grant. So they gave them a small amount of money to write a bigger grant. Ironically, we still don't have as much money as they asked for, but they, Brian then worked in Australia, and I think they're a couple, and not Brian, sorry, Ken got a job working with the drug user group in Australia, and he left. So I sort of was left with everything. It was the original vision of Vandu, which they made the name up, Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users, was going to be a network. And at that time, raves were illegal in Vancouver, and they quickly became legal. But so we sort of had the ravers part of the project, and I was doing the injection drug users downtown, and we didn't have smokable crack at that time. People had to make their own. But anyway, that's how our name came to be. And then we got a tiny grant, and it was still really touch and go, because after the first year of our grant, they took our funding away from us. And then we did a sort of classic lobby where we had already had as guest speakers the member of the Legislative Assembly and the member of Parliament for our neighborhood and some city councillors. So we actually had support from politicians. So when we fought to get our own funding, we got our funding and we got an increase. So what was remarkable in my experience as an organizer was that people who had never been asked anything ever and included anywhere ever, it was always come back when you got 6 months clean or 2 years clean or something, everywhere. Now what seemed to always be considered what was wrong with them made them a member of a group, and no one else could join. So it was very attractive. Our membership was like 80 the first year, and then doubled to 160, and we were up to 400. It just multiplied, and we kept membership names because we held an AGM. We were really strictly sticking with a democratic process where the members all join, and then you have your big election every year, who's going to be on the board. And we did register the board, and we're actually a registered nonprofit society. So we did that. It took us about a year, because we just kept taking back all of the times we would write anything. I would say, okay, the committee's going to meet to write the purpose of the group or the constitution and bylaws, and then they'd report back to the big meeting on Saturday. So it was Saturday at 2:00 for every single Saturday for years.